left with just the 417th, I think, and I'm going to start out with Bob McCullen, whose father also was with our 417th, and he has a great story to tell about his dad.
My father was then Second Lieutenant Robert McCullen, 055-1406, 417th Night Fighter Squad. He was a radar observer on a Bristol Beaufighter type aircraft. The call sign was Waist Knot 81. He and his pilot, Malcolm Duff Campbell, were involved in what Brick Eisel described in his book as the 417th's greatest contribution to winning the war. I would like to read you 3 short historical accounts of the event, but first tell you a story about how it is that I am here. My father died when I was 5 years old. 15 or so years ago, my mother gave me a small box of all of his memorabilia from World War II. It wasn't much, but it set me on a quest to get to know him. And it began with letters to museums, to the Air Force, and other organizations. And finally, put me in contact with Rich Ziebart, who invited me to a reunion about 10 or 12 years ago in Las Vegas. And I was able to attend that with my mother. And we met several squadron members who served with him and filled in all the blanks with first-hand stories and accounts. And I will just like to say that I will feel eternally grateful to all you men who served and the sacrifices you made for our country. But also to men like Rich Ziebart and Colonel Brick Eisel, who labored to preserve the history of the night fighter squadrons. And as a night fighter descendant who labored aimlessly for years to learn this history, I would like to encourage everybody not to leave here without this book, particularly those of you who have ties to the 414th, 415th, 416th, and especially the 417th. Purchase as many copies as you can of this. Make sure that everyone in your family has this book, children, grandchildren to be, because for someone who has labored for years to learn this history, it's all right here. This is a superb book. So, chapter 1 of this book talks about my father's story. And, I was thinking I would just read that, but I will let you do that, and I'll just read some of the historical accounts. My father's story is very similar to the one you heard yesterday from Captain Harold Osberger. And the first account that I would like to read is from the official squadron history, and it was written by then the commander of the squadron, Richard McRae. Thus, on December 12th, when orders were received to exert additional effort in nullifying any enemy attempt to traffic with neutrals, squadron morale was stretched taut. Instructions in brief were that in addition to protective patrols, flights were to be airborne to search out and destroy large German transports, which would attempt to carry military and economic experts to a large neutral country to further Germany's war effort. And that neutral country, of course, was Spain. Intelligence was informed that such planes would conceivably carry on their relentless method of sowing doubt by Germany's most able propagandists among Allied nations. Such ships would, of course, carry large sums of precious bullion for the secret purchase of vital minerals and for propagandizement. The squadron was also informed that the enemy would probably attempt sending decoys and would conceivably send fighter protection. To carry out this additional mission obviously would impose a terrific strain on men and machines. The easy way out might have been a frank declaration to headquarters that the precarious condition of the planes on hand made compliance almost impossible. But there was no declaration as such. There were no complaints. Air and ground crews, trained to duty and discipline, began to fulfill the assigned mission. Despite the bitterly cold weather, men worked all night and day to keep the creaky fighters flying. And air crews, despite all the accumulated hazards of weather, fatigue, unpredictable ships, and the hounding memory of men who had crashed in nightmarish succession through no fault of their own, flew ceaseless patrols. Engines would fail repeatedly, and many a fighter would labor back on a single engine, with the same crew going back aloft in whatever was available. That Lieutenants Campbell and my father, Lieutenant McCullen, on the night of December 28th, finally found and destroyed a large German transport was no accident. It was the cold-cut result of perseverance, devotion to duty, and the stubborn determination of a squadron to complete its mission, regardless of the hazards involved. Although the encounter has been described in the citation, and I will read that in a moment, and in an attached extract of the brief combat report, there is only a slight reference to the most courageous and most extraordinary part of the encounter. The fact that the crew pursued the German plane less than 20 feet above the water. Such a tactic was compelled by the desperate effort of the enemy plane to escape, a move which had enabled many a German aircraft to flee unharmed during the European months of warfare. Even in daylight, with increased vision and the stabilizing factor of horizon, the destruction of an aircraft at sea level is a worthy and unusual feat. At night, such an attempt may easily be labeled as deadly. Yet, the pilot, Lieutenant Campbell, with exceeding skill, clung tenaciously in the darkness to the fleeing German and shot him down into the sea without injury to his own plane or crew. His brilliant action in fair assessment could be called the feat of an individual. It was not. It was the accomplishment of a squadron of men who, despite an incredible series of obstacles and accumulated hazards, completed their mission with resolution and unfaltering courage. And another account that I have stated that they used 1,400 rounds to bring that plane down. The 417th Night Fighter Squadron, as a result of that, was also given a Presidential Unit Citation. And although it's a little repetitious, I would like to read that. After rendering unceasing protection by night to ships and personnel being assembled in Mediterranean waters for the invasion of southern France, and fighting off early enemy attempts to bomb troops and supplies at secured beachheads, the 417th Night Fighter Squadron was given the heavy responsibility of protecting the entire coast of southern France, and particularly the port of Marseille, one of the two existing arteries through which all vital supplies and reinforcements were fed to the fighting fronts in Western Europe. In spite of extremely adverse weather conditions, including freezing temperatures, persistently low ceilings, and 70-mile-an-hour gales common to the Rhone Valley, weather which grounded all other aircraft in France, air crews of the 417th Night Fighter Squadron, in complete defiance of all hazards involved, resolutely performed their assigned task and turned away enemy attempts to prepare Marseille for bombing by reconnaissance and pathfinding. On the night of 13 December 1944, the squadron was informed that the enemy would attempt to transport a large number of high government officials, Nazi leaders, and gold bullion to a neutral country for the purpose of intensifying the war effort against the Allies, and that every attempt must be made to thwart such an attempt. Despite ceaseless gales, bitter cold temperatures in which ground crews worked without shelter or hangars of tents, and burdened with the mental hazard of depressingly long lists of casualties, suffered from weather and the mechanical failures of the outmoded boat fighters with which the squadron was equipped. Air crews courageously went aloft each night, gallantly and in complete disregard of the discomforts, dangers, and discouraging weather conditions. Both ground and air personnel determinedly carried on their dual mission. On the night of 28 December 1944, their persevering efforts were culminated when a bullfighter crew, with exceeding skill and flying less than 20 feet above the water, tracked down a 4-engine German transport, and after a determined pursuit, shot it down in flames off the Hires Islands. Through their courage, determination, technical skill, and extreme gallantry against extraordinary hazards, the personnel of the 417th Night Fighter Squadron have reflected great credit upon themselves and the armed forces of the United States. And finally, again, a little repetitious, but I would like to read. My father was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Croix de Guerre and a bunch of other medals and decorations. And the account of the award of the Distinguished Flying Cross that he got goes like this. Robert J. McCullen, 0. Rich, would you read that?
I don't know if I can do it. Robert J. McCullen, 055-1406, Second Lieutenant, 417th Night Fighter Squadron, for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight as radar observer of a Beaufighter-type aircraft on the 28th December 1944, while flying on patrol all over the coast of southern France, Lieutenant McCullen contacted a Ju-290. Displaying superior professional skill and resourcefulness as he directed his pilot in attack, Lieutenant McCullen enabled him to close within range and destroy one engine on the hostile plane. Continuing to maintain contact as the Ju-290 dived to near water level, Lieutenant McCullen again brought the Beaufighter within range, and his pilot, accurate fire, struck the enemy aircraft. It was seen to fall from control and crash into the sea. His outstanding proficiency in combat and steadfast devotion to duty have reflected great credit upon himself and the armed forces of the United States of America by command of Major General Cannon.
Thank you. I'm a little more composed now, so. And another interesting fact about this is in the book that the German book that was talked about yesterday, neither a record of this loss by Germany or the one of Major Osberger were recorded in there. So these were really top secret or things that were unofficial, you know, that the high-ranking officials just took off and did this. And Britt Geisel and I were talking yesterday, and no attempt that we have researched has ever been made to recover this plane that they shot down or any of the gold bullion. There's never been any record of that. So we'll keep you informed, but we're going to try to interest a bounty hunter in going out that way. Thank you.